Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You have reached the award-nominated No Name Cinema Society, and this is our Sound Off, our freeform segment. It's our 40th Sound Off. 40th time we're doing this sort of casual freeform segment. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler. I'm here back in Astoria, in the Queens part of New York City. If somebody asks me, like, what is the Sound Off when I tell them about it, it's really just like us talking about movies. I do a top 5 usually. There's various little segments. It's just fun movie talk for you movie fans. And I got a couple other movie fans to host the show with me. First, ladies and gentlemen, one of my partners from the 1988 in review, Alex Evans, is here.
Hello, everyone.
And also doing his first ever Sound Off. As many shows as he's done, he's never been on a Sound Off. So now he's hit for the cycle. James Monahan.
Hey, everybody. I have no idea what I'm getting into.
Can he handle the pressure?
Will James be able to handle the pressure? Speaking of pressure, we've been under a lot of pressure for this set of episodes, our 56th set of episodes. We did our classic this past Thursday with a review of Driving Miss Daisy, celebrating its 30th anniversary. And tonight, of course, is the Sound Off, in which we're going to have a special announcement. Alex and I are going to report on our time at TCM Fest this past April. I'm going to do an obscure movie discovery that came from that TCM Fest. And I'm supposed to count down my top 5 films that feature interracial friendships as inspired by our review of Driving Miss Daisy. That's a sort of a primer of what's going to happen tonight. So, James, does it feel a little bit better? You know what you're getting into now?
Kind of. Am I supposed to have opinions about all this stuff?
I mean, you have opinions about everything. So, I mean, I think you'll be fine.
I do. Including you, JB. You look so handsome.
Well, yeah, I'll save that one for the end. Keep the audience tuned in. I'm probably drinking alone, so I've got here a Voodoo Ranger IPA, which I don't sound spooky. I feel like I would have had it before. I've had a lot of the IPAs, but I don't necessarily remember having it before. You guys aren't big drinkers like me. I'm borderline alcoholic. James, I don't suppose you're drinking with me tonight?
Drinking water out of a mug with a T.S. Eliot quote on it. It says, "I have measured out my life in coffee spoons."
No one cares about the water. Like, I don't know why everyone announces their water drinking. Alex, are you drinking alcohol with me?
I have like 1 sip of coffee left, and then it's cold, and then I have water.
Yay, water. Holler.
I mean, I also have water. I mean, I do drink water, but I mean, if we're going to talk about movies, like, let's get loose and freeform. All right, so it's time for a special society announcement. And this one will affect James directly. Every year, or the last couple years anyway, we've put forth a poll to you guys. This year in our 1988 review, which Alex was a part of, we gave you the option about what the next year that we studied. On that 1980 review, I put this slide up and gave you guys the option to pick which of these years you wanted us to look at this particular year. Did you want us to go back 25 years, 50 years, 60 years, or 75 years? We made an announcement on the blog. Here's what we had to say live from TCM Fest. Every year at TCM Fest, we announce the year that we're going to look at, and we kick it off at the festival. For example, in 2015, we look back 25 years at
1990.
It's kind of quicker with those. in 2016, we look back 50 years at
1966.
And then the year after that, we look back 75 years at
1942.
And last year with Devin, we look back 30 years at
1988. That was a big one.
Big one for you.
That was the one that took over my life.
And we announced it at this very same spot.
We did. Yeah.
So we've looked at 40s, we've looked at 60s, we've looked at 80s, we looked at 90s. So we only had really, a few decades left. So we're going to look. We're going to go back 60 years this year and look back at 1959. We're going to do the 50s, 1959, one of the greatest years in the history of American cinema, and it starts right here, right now, at this screening of this film. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going back 60 years and looking at 1959, and my co-host for that show will be Patrick Taylor and one James Monahan.
Hello. Great. I'm really excited about that show and that year. JB, that was 59. That was only 2 years after you were born, right?
It was 3 years. I was 3 years old.
Oh wow!
Right.
So maybe a little 3-year-old you remembers the chariot race from Ben-Hur.
Now, let me ask you this. You had said that maybe you were going to start with Ben-Hur. I'm going to end with it, but did you actually go see it when TCM released it in theaters?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't pass that up to see that magnificent film in an actual theater. And I may watch it again before we do our show.
I saw it at the Ziegfeld years ago as well, so I have had that experience. So we don't want to give too much away in terms of the quality or lack thereof of some of the films, but how far have you gotten? Because we're usually in different cities, so we haven't watched a lot together. I'm only got about 10 or so far.
You're ahead of me. I only have a handful.
Well, I'm probably going to wind up watching a lot more.
I'm not sure I'm looking forward to watching Plan 9 from Outer Space. That's one of the films, right?
It is. And I have the same reticence, but I feel like it's a must watch.
Yes, I've seen Ed Wood, but never saw that source material.
I think it's short, so it'll be painless, and maybe it'll be like The Room, like so bad that it's entertaining. Alex, do you have any like advice that you want to give to James as he embarks on this time travel experiment?
I highly suggest you take notes, and if with like your first 10 films, you come up with like categories or general things you're noticing about the decade, and just try to keep those in mind with all the films. Like that's an inventory I wish I had done with 88, but thankfully we jammed so many in the last couple weeks that they were all pretty fresh. But I know JB's notes really helped pull the show together.
Did you enjoy the experience?
Oh, absolutely. I've been recommending movies to people from 1988 all over the place since, and I feel like a lot of the best films from that year and the worst have influenced me in my own work this year.
Yeah, I've experienced that too, and I've been trying to explain this project to like new people I meet, and like it's weird how like these films, at least for me from 88 and also for me from 90, 66, and 42, they feel like ours. You know what I mean? Like I feel like possessive of these films now. Like I feel like connected to them because we studied them so intensely.
You just always associate Devin with she's having a baby.
He's referring to the Kevin Bacon, Elizabeth McGovern, I think, directed by John Hughes, or at least written by John Hughes. I can't remember. Alec Baldwin's in it. Okay, other fun tidbits in terms of our finale episode, which are going to air hopefully in early February. The Oscars are early this year, early February 2020. Alex is going to be part of the top 10 of 2019, along with Jim. And our Oscar preview this year, which we predict some of the Oscar winners in several main categories, will feature Devin and George will be part of that show. So everybody's working on a new show this year, so we don't have any repeats. So we made that announcement at TCM Fest, and every year we try to do what we call a TCM report from TCM Fest. So that's what's coming up next. Alex and I got to go to the TCM Fest in LA in mid-April or about, and we got to see a bunch of films. Alex was not with Devin and I for Sleeping Beauty. That's how we kicked off the weekend. But then, Alex, you were with us for our next film. We went to see Steel Magnolias, celebrating its 30th anniversary.
Yeah, I absolutely loved I'd actually never seen Steel Magnolias before that. I saw it, my parents came along with us because they were in town, and I really understood why it has always been a favorite film of my mother's and my sister. There's a joke in our family that every time we watch a movie, my mom's comment is always, I wish they built on the relationships more. Steel Magnolias is definitely a film that would never be a complaint about it.
Yeah, she didn't seem to have that issue. And then, speaking of must-sees in a big theater, we closed out the weekend by going to see, celebrating its 80th anniversary, Gone with the Wind in the Chinese theater, complete with opening and intermission music and the whole deal. One of the most majestic experiences I've had, is seeing that movie on not just the big screen, but TCL Chinese theater. It's pretty amazing. And Alex, you and your family and Devin was with us. Kind of an amazing night.
Yeah, it's an incredibly well-made film. I still think it's poignant today to get the Southern perspective on the huge cultural change of the last 200 years. It holds up, and anybody who hasn't seen it, it's worth the 3 hours.
3.5.
3.5, yeah. It's good. You can break it up, but it's worth checking out if you haven't seen it.
It felt like 3. That's how quickly it moves. Alex, we'll have to bring James one of these years to the TCM Fest.
Yeah. How many films did you see?
I saw 4. Alex saw 2. Devin saw 3 of the 4. And I'm about to talk about the last one that I went to see because that's going to lead us into our next segment. But they show hundreds of classics over the course of 4 days. Wow. I only went to see 4 because it's $20 a pop, and Gone with the Wind was their big closing one, so that cost $30. So I cut it down from 5 to 4 because of the expenditure. But pass holders can spend $500 and see as many as they like.
After I saw Ben-Hur in the theater, the first thing I thought was, I need to see Gone with the Wind now in a theater like this.
Every 5 years, they kind of re-release it in theaters. See, I'd seen it at Lincoln Center before, but seeing it I've seen it at Bryant Park before, Gone with the Wind, but seeing it at the Chinese theater was something special. George has talked about coming out for TCM Fest, so James, maybe next year.
Yeah, just use the podcast money to pay for my airfare. I look forward to it.
All the podcast money that we make, it'll be.
Yes.
Speaking of which, we're brought to you by MeUndies and ZipRecruiter. Give us money, please.
All right, so the TCM report is going to lead us directly to the obscure movie discovery. This new segment where we pick up films that are sort of random and not as well known. We take a look at them and review them for you. It was one of our 1942 films that was playing at TCM Fest. And normally I let the guys choose blindly like a number and pick what obscure film I'm going to review. But since we're talking about TCM Fest, I figured I would do the film that I saw at TCM Fest, which is kind of obscure movie from 1942, a year that we studied. We weren't able to find this film when we were studying it, back in 2017. So I jumped at the chance to see it when TCM announced it, that they would show it at their annual film festival in spite of its 9 a.m. start. Here's a picture of me waiting in line for the film All Through the Night, it's called, from 1942, starring Humphrey Bogart. What I have to say about this movie is it's a fun but strange movie. It features a lot of actors that I love: Humphrey Bogart, William Demarest, Conrad Veidt, Judith Anderson. And it has a really interesting premise: gangsters versus fifth columnists in pre-war New York City. However, the screenplay has a real issue with tone, or the movie does anyway. The tone is all over the place. The screenwriters seem awfully proud of their quips, and though they are pretty funny, they are sometimes really out of place. While the dialogue is sharp, there's never any real sense of danger, though the director tries to force that at times. It's as though the director and the screenwriters weren't really on the same page. Performance-wise, Bogart is as charismatic as ever in another role that George Raft passed on. William Demarest is once again a delight. We saw him in Sullivan's Travels in our 1942 in review, and at last year's TCM Fest when Devin and I saw The Miracle of Morgan Creek. The women in the film, performance-wise, really suffer, however. Jane Darwell is very bad. It's hard to believe that she was Ma Jode just 2 years earlier. Judith Anderson also offers very little, trying to recreate Miss Danvers as a Nazi sympathizer, and instead comes up with something very muddled. Overall, I blame the director for all the film's shortcomings. It's his job to have a consistency of vision, and the lack thereof left his actors hanging. In spite of all its quirks, the film is a hell of a lot of fun, oddly captivating in its own unique way. Perhaps because it doesn't feel like any other film. It's such a peculiar mix of comedy and action. The film is silly, fun, confusing, fascinating, interesting, and exciting all at the same time. So it might be worth watching. Just bear in mind some of these warnings. I don't suppose either of you guys have seen All Through the Night. James?
No, just All Through the Day.
I don't know that film. Alex, I told you I was going to do this obscure. You threatened to maybe watch it and see if you can join me in the discussion.
I tried to watch it. I just remembered as you've been describing it, my parents taped it off TCM when I was home for Christmas a couple years ago, and I did see it, but not for like 2 or 3 years. I enjoyed it.
Does anything I say make sense or ring true about it?
Yeah, it does. I enjoyed Bogart in it, from what I recall, and it does give an interesting insight into pre-war America, and we kind of have a revisionist idea of where America was at politically in the 30s that is a bit off from the reality.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the reason why the film sort of got forgotten is it was made before Pearl Harbor and was released shortly thereafter. Its sort of tone, its jokey tone, didn't seem to fit with the nationalist pride going on at the time. And also, like, portraying Nazis as sort of bungling fools that New York City gangsters can take care of. They released it, but it was sort of like not given much ballyhoo in terms of promotion. Go ahead, Alex.
If Danny Trejo was in a movie now beating up Nazis, I'd love it.
For sure. But I mean, like, you can see my point. That, like, this concept of, like, New York City, like, thugs going up against fifth columnists, it's kind of a fun idea. James?
What compelled me about your description was a mix of tones. I'm always fascinated by those films. Even if it kind of fails, I like the attempt.
It's very weird. It's like a kooky film. It's like fascinating. And to your point, it seems very unintentional, but it's still enjoyable.
Now you said, hey, Humphrey Bogart is, charismatic. I'm just trying to think of, is there a modern equivalent of Humphrey Bogart? I mean, he had very unconventional looks for a leading man back
For
then.
years, I always thought Harrison Ford was sort of like his modern day god. Like, not as much anymore because Harrison Ford is much older, and he's outlived Bogart. Bogart died fairly young because of, all his hard drinking, etc. I always thought about Harrison Ford as sort of being that he's the reticent hero kind of figure, and Harrison Ford sort of plays that, and that's a lot what Bogey does.
Yeah, maybe people disagree, but I mean, Harrison Ford, I look at him, he's a really handsome dude, and
well, I'm not talking about looks. I mean, it's more like that reluctant hero. But I mean, like, bear in mind, it wasn't so much looks in the early days of sound. It was the uniqueness of vocal quality that separated a lot of the leading men. And if you think about Cary Grant and Bogart and Jimmy Stewart, they all had a very imitatable way of speaking. In that sense, their films tend to do better and last longer.
That's interesting. So maybe voice more important than looks. Okay.
Potentially, but they were also just like oozing charisma, whereas like somebody like was it Robert Young just like doesn't.
I would say that note is really a smart thing to keep in mind for the way we make content now. Like so much of how people consume stuff, probably even this podcast, is while doing other things. And so you're not always looking at the screen, but you're always hearing the story happen. So casting an actor with a distinctive voice is a good thing to think of for filmmakers. That's going to keep people hooked in.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the good-looking actors, of the period, and you think about Tyrone Power, who sucked as an actor. Like, he was terrible. And you think about Joel McCrea, who was not very good. Oh, another imitatable voice, and it's curious to think about what you think about his looks, James, but John Wayne, another imitatable voice that was a big box office star of the period.
Sure. Yeah, a unique voice.
Unique voice, and not maybe in the 30s he had some good looks, but by the time he hit the 40s, he wasn't like a studly, like he was the big guy, but he wasn't like super.
That's part of his appeal is that he's not trying to be that.
Yeah, I agree.
His whole persona is unapologetically masculine.
It's true, but James brought up the point, so I just thought I would dig a little deeper on that. But yeah, All Through the Night, I'd be curious if you guys do decide to watch it based on my review, what you think about it, and also the fans, especially now that we're on Insta. Let us know what you think about All Through the Night. You guys have not been shy about letting me know about what you think about my thoughts about movies, so continue to do that. All right, you guys ready to move on for the final segment?
Do it. Yes. Make it happen.
Yeah, see how quick this is going? It's time for JB's Top 5, ladies and gentlemen. We do this every sound off. I count down a top 5 related to one of the films that we've reviewed in this set of episodes, and tonight the top 5 is based on a review of Driving Miss Daisy. Top 5 films with interracial friendships. I specify friendships, not romances, and this top 5 came courtesy of James. I gave James and Alex a list of potential top 5 to choose from, and Alex was busy, and so James is the only one that replied.
I'm the decider.
And so here we are doing a top 5 of interracial films that feature interracial friendships. Now, I said not romances because I do feel like it's a different thing, interracial friendships and interracial romances. I feel like that's a whole different can of worms. A couple films that straddle that line that came to mind include Patch of Blue from 1965 and Far From Heaven from 2002. And I consulted George on this because he has similar classic experience to me. And he said maybe Patch of Blue, but both of them are sort of closer to romance than they are to friendship. So I've eliminated both those. Patch of Blue and Far From Heaven will not be considered for this top 5. So that's my disclaimer. You guys ready for some top 5 action?
Oh yeah, give me some action, baby.
Give me some interracial friendship action. And and really think about it. I'm going to start with the most recent Best Picture Oscar winner. Green Book is my number 5 here in the top 5 interracial friendship movies of all time. I thought about putting Brian's Song here, but even though Brian's Song has a long legacy, it's a TV movie that's much more impactful, but it also is kind of sloppily made. And the same thing can't be said of Green Book, which was my number 7 movie of 2018 and my favorite of the Best Picture nominees this year. The leading performances by Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali are what elevate the film to be something more than it is. However, for all its social commentary, it's also highly entertaining and smart, which earns extra points with me in a way that Driving Miss Daisy, for example, never really accomplishes. Director Peter Farrelly doesn't break any new ground visually or stylistically, but he tells his story confidently and with consistency. And the concept of a good story well told is a bit underrated these days, undervalued as well. And I think Green Book fits that bill perfectly. You know, it's not groundbreaking, but it's really, really well done. And looking at the list of films that I thought about, it's the one I enjoyed the fifth the most. James, you weren't a huge hater of Green Book, as I recall.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And I really liked Ali's character, especially. It wasn't a character I'd ever seen before, like this musician who didn't really belong in any category, really. A guy who lived in Carnegie Hall. I mean, it was an interesting character. I didn't think Vigo's character was as interesting because he was such like an Italian stereotype to me. And I think it was a well-done film. It was ultimately kind of a cute film. I didn't find it profound. Like you said, it's kind of well-trod territory. But I didn't really get all the hate it was getting online. People saying it wasn't woke enough.
Yeah, I didn't see that necessarily either. Alex, you still haven't seen it, it sounds like.
No, I haven't.
Time for number 4, and this is the one is a little more obscure, and I'm kind of excited about it. Small, intimate drama from 1957, directed by Martin Ritt, perhaps best known for the film Sounder. The film is called Edge of the City, and it features John Cassavetes and Sidney Poitier, who, as you might imagine, since he was one of the only black actors working in the 50s and 60s, will appear again on this list. The two men play longshoremen in New York who form an unlikely friendship, both trying to escape from the past and carve out a new future for themselves. It's been a long time, but I remember this film making a visceral impression on me. And as the title might suggest, the film is gritty and nuanced. It's very character-driven and, as such, right up my alley. The two actors are excellent and, along with the director, put a great deal of attention into the scene work, which feels vivid and real. And as a result, the film is a lot more naturalistic than many of its contemporaries, which potentially James will see for himself when he visits some of the films of 1959. Guys, I don't suppose either of you have seen Edge of the City.
Yeah, I haven't seen that film. I was curious if a Sidney Poitier film would make your list, but no, I haven't seen that one.
And it's early Poitier, too. Like, he was not a huge star yet. Alex, Edge of the City.
I have not seen it.
It's a little more obscure, so I'm not surprised you guys hadn't seen it, but I do recommend it. So if you guys do see it, come back to me, let me know, and we'll do it as a second run, maybe. It is directed Wild. As a combo, too, they're very good, Cassavetes and Poitier. Like, really good chemistry there. All right, moving on to number 3. We'll let Alex finish his email, and we'll do number 3. Number 3 is a more recent film, Craig Brewer's follow-up to Hustle and Flow. Black Snake Moan is a surprising and underrated masterpiece. The promotional campaign of the film tried to focus on the more salacious elements of the movie, but I think it's actually a beautiful character-driven story of two wayward people finding peace in the unlikeliest of places. Christina Ricci plays a former child abuse victim whose pain causes her to act out sexually. Somehow she comes into the care of black farmer Samuel L. Jackson, who takes care of her in spite of the financial and emotional hardship caused by the dissolution of his marriage. They wind up helping to heal each other's pain, somewhat anyway, and taking some extreme measures in the process. Their relationship is kind of beautiful because in spite of all the sexuality of film, that's not their relationship. What they have comes to be much deeper. And once again, it's the performances that help make the film stand apart. It might be the best performances in the careers of both actors. And it's stunning to me that Christina Ricci hasn't been Oscar nominated for anything yet. These two desperate people are the kind of folks that we rarely see films about, poor folks suffering from more than just poverty. The film is a powerful, sweet, and troubling exploration of the labyrinth that is the human heart and how friendships can have so much more resonance than any romance could. Guys, Black Snake Moan from 2006, so it's possible that you guys have seen it. Alex?
I love the film. I agree with your assessment of it. I think the marketing campaign did not do it justice. I was really impressed with how unique of characters they both are and the relationship between them. I thought the music and cinematography was really just spellbinding and captures you into the story.
Yeah, the blues stuff, particularly that stuff sung by Samuel Jackson, is pretty awesome, and yeah, like the craft elements are outstanding as well. Thank you for mentioning that. James, have you seen Black Snake Moan?
No, I haven't. It has a real intriguing title. I'm curious what the title has to do with the content.
It's a blues song. It's a blues song that he sings at one point in the movie.
Gotcha. When I hear Black Snake Moan at first glance, and I hear Samuel Jackson's in it, I don't know. I might.
Snakes on a Plane comes to mind.
Exactly, Snakes on a Plane comes to mind, or it sounds like it might be a blaxploitation pastiche, or it might be a martial arts film. I don't know.
And the poster of the film, which features Samuel Jackson holding a chain with Christina Ricci on the other end of it, can lead people down that path.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, maybe they didn't market it well or give people a sense of what it was.
They marketed it different than what it was.
It's a movie about two people fighting their like addiction and sadness, but they portrayed it as just like a kinky sex rom. And that's not what it is.
That's what the poster suggested, but it's not even close to that.
Absolutely.
And it's also an early film in the career of one JT. I think it's the first or second film for Justin Timberlake. I was waiting for a reaction from James, and I didn't
even remember that he was in it because Christina Ricci and Samuel L. Jackson's performances are so memorable. Not that he did a bad job. It's just.
What do you think about my bold? What do you think about my bold statement? The best performances of both their careers.
I'm struggling to think of like specific films that I think are better for either of them. I was very impressed with both their performances.
She was good in The Opposite of Sex, but not as good as she is in Black Snake Moan. And he's of course good in a lot of things, including Pulp Fiction, but not as good as he is here.
I don't think either of them usually get the chance to explore that complex and layered of a character. Like the text really gave them so much to work with, and they took it and ran with it.
Yeah.
It also sounds kind of a depressing subject. I mean, you said like really impoverished people.
You've seen Hustle and Flow,
in very weird ways.
Craig Brewer, who did Hustle and Flow, and Samuel L. Jackson, they find the humor. Like there's entertaining elements to it.
I'm gonna check
it out. The humor, which is another bonus point for it, I think, as well.
This is why I tune in to this and participate for these great recommendations.
Even though you don't tune in, you participate, but you don't actually watch when you're not on.
Oh, come on.
Neither does Alex. It's okay.
I watched a few.
Did you?
Yeah.
You weren't on. Okay, good. All right, number 2 on my top 5 films featuring interracial friendships, and we're going to return to Sidney Poitier and another Best Picture winner, this time from 1967. In the Heat of the Night is good old-fashioned cinematic narrative storytelling. It's a compelling detective story combined with racial relations in the Deep South, which is simultaneously entertaining and a microcosm of the seismic social shift in the country as far as race relations are concerned. It features an inner-city African-American cop forced to work with a complicated case in the Deep South, a situation rife with potential that the film delivers. Great performances by both Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger, the latter winning Best Actor for his troubles. And director Norman Jewison balances plot and character in a detailed, nuanced fashion. It's a film that gets talked about a lot. It's a classic in the truest sense of the word, so I'm not going to say anything here that hasn't probably been said before, but it's certainly a worthy number 2, and their relationship at the core of it, there's terrific arc for both of them as they get to know each other while solving this case. It's very possible there's a film that both of you have seen. James, we'll start with you. In the Heat of the Night.
Yeah, I think I saw this years ago. It's a great choice for a rewatch. Definitely the more famous of the 2 Poitier films you've mentioned so far.
Yeah, and don't forget the 1988 TV show. Speaking of 1988, it was remade into a TV show with Carol O'Connor in the Red Steiger role and Harold Rollins Jr. or Howard Rollins Jr., I think, in the Sidney Poitier role. They updated it to be in the 80s, but it was interesting that it updated so easily. Alex, have you seen In the Heat of the Night?
I have, but not since high school. But I remember enjoying it.
But for high school, for you, it was just like 5 or 6 years ago.
A little longer than that, unfortunately. But thanks for the vote of youth.
You're welcome. I do what I can to make you all feel good for being on the show.
I'll say this: at my film school graduation, my assistant directing professor gave her speech about how great of a performer Sidney Poitier was to work with, and I think she did like 3 films with him. Talked about that as like a standard for like how to conduct yourself on a set and in a film production.
Yeah, I think as it stands now, he's the oldest living Best Actor winner, I believe. He won in 1963 for Lilies of the Field. On to my number 1, and this one might affect James a little bit too. Earlier tonight, we announced that the year that we will be studying throughout 2019 is 1959, 60 years ago. Well, as it happens, and it just worked out this way, my number 1 film on this list is from 1959. And so you're going to get an early spoiler. This film is also a top 100 film for me, so expect to hear about it more come February. The film is called Imitation of Life, the highly controversial film directed by Douglas Sirk. Now, there are those who attack this film as being racist and unwoke in its depiction of a friendship between a white woman played by Lana Turner and a black woman played by Juanita Moore. In the original film from the 30s, this is a remake. In the original film from the 30s, the black woman goes from being a maid to being a business partner. so they are theoretically become on a more level playing field. Here in the 1950s version, she stays the maid. Now, the decision to make Lana Turner's character an actress instead of an entrepreneur in this version made the business partner plot line kind of moot. That's why she stays the maid. Some modern critics have an issue with that. However, if you watch the film, there's no white savior here. There's no question who the real hero of the film is. The real glue to the makeshift family of 2 mothers and 2 daughters trying to navigate the dicey waters in the 1950s for both women and African Americans is Juanita's Moore character of Annie. Now, the film is melodrama of the highest order, soap at its soapiest, but it is the most elegantly and beautifully executed melodrama ever filmed. Few directors use color, framing, and mise-en-scène with as much cinematic effectiveness as Douglas Sirk. Its plot and its acting may be something for daytime television, but Douglas Sirk adds depth and detail through his gorgeous filmmaking techniques. We'll obviously talk about this film again later in 1959 in review, but in terms of this top 5, it's my favorite film featuring an interracial relationship. So it's a film that James is going to have to watch later this year. I assume you've not seen it before, James.
No, I haven't. I mean, I've only heard about it. Yeah, you're getting me excited here, JB.
Do what I can. Alex, have you ever seen Imitation of Life?
I have not.
Imitation of Life, we'll revisit it for the 1959 review, but it is the clear-cut number 1 for me on this list. Now, there's one film that I think stands out as me not putting on here, which I'll get to. I'm curious if you guys have other ones that you thought I would mention and did not.
Not surprisingly, I was just curious if you were going to mention any like cop buddy films, you know, like Lethal Weapon or 48 Hours, but these are not great works of art.
Yeah, I guess that you just answered your own questions, it sounds like.
Lethal Weapon is a beautiful piece of art.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but
Predator has interracial friendships?
Sure. I still don't
Rocky II?
I still don't know if that beats any of the films that I have in my top 5.
I feel like Rocky II opened more minds than those other films. I just want people to decide.
I think you're thinking Rocky III, where they actually became friends.
Oh, maybe.
Either way, do you have any serious ones, Alex? Serious contenders for this list that you feel that I omitted?
Forrest Gump?
Forrest Gump is a top 100 film for me. In that sense, I would have possibly should have included it. I would say that
that's not the main focus of the story.
Yeah, that was gonna be my response. It's an element of a movie that's much larger than that, but it's a fair point. But I didn't consider it for that reason. James, should I have?
No.
Okay.
You can also consider Get Hard with Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart.
Alex is clearly not taking this seriously.
Well, it's funny. Speaking of Kevin Hart, you know, the topic did make me think of a recent film, The Upside,
which I just saw on a plane. The plane ride out here. I just saw that
with Bryan Cranston and Kevin Hart, which was a remake, I believe, of a French film. I think the most successful financially French film of all time,
The Untouchables.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a great film, so I would include it on the list.
It's not a bad film. I honestly think it's the best acting Kevin Hart's ever done.
I agree. Yeah, he really took it to the dramatic level.
I mean, one of my criticisms of a film we both like, Jumanji, like the only criticism I have is Jumanji is Kevin Hart not really acting.
On that film, we keep being totally in sync on Jumanji.
I love it.
It brought us closer.
That's coming up in our scholarly discussion, but it was an enjoyable film.
It comes up on the show because it was my number 2 film of 2017. Some people like to mock me for it, and others like James have my back. And James, your 1959 partner, Patrick, also had my back on this.
Jumanji Unite.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
As did Devin's much younger girlfriend, Kelly.
Yeah, I was thinking about the topic again and thinking about my top films of all time, my favorites. Do they have strong interracial relationships? And Empire Strikes Back is in my top 5. Han Solo and Chewbacca is a strong
interspecies.
I thought you were going to go Han Solo and Lando Calrissian.
More of a subplot.
That too, that's a subplot.
And is it Lando really his friend in Empire Strikes Back?
He's a friend of me, ultimately, yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess what I would say to that is
why just
racial relations in a long time ago in the galaxy far, far away are sort of not the same. So, it's not the same dynamic. So I'm going to...
you're going to disqualify Chewbacca, everyone.
I'm going to discount that, yeah. The film that I thought I would get the most grief for leaving off is a 1958 film from Stanley Kramer called The Defiant Ones, which again features Sidney Poitier. In this case, he is handcuffed to Tony Curtis as they escape from prison together. I find Stanley Kramer to be an overrated filmmaker, mostly incapable of nuance. His heart was frequently in the right place, consistently making films that challenge social issues like bigotry and prejudice. But unfortunately, his filmmaking skill, from my perspective, did not match that heart. So as well known as it is, I just don't think The Defiant Ones is a good film. And as such, I left it off the list. I don't suppose either of you have ever seen The Defiant Ones with Sidney Poitier and Tony Curtis.
I feel like I should have because I've heard about it so much. But no, sorry.
It's okay. Like I said, I don't enjoy it, but that's why I left it off the list. But I'm anticipating the audience being like, what about The Defiant Ones? And that's how the audience sounds when they're complaining.
They're a bunch of 70-year-old ladies, right? In a hair salon.
All right, guys, that's all. That's all that I have for the sound off. How do you guys feel?
Pretty neato.
I'm going to have to rewatch this, or maybe you can send me an email with all these films you recommended, because they sound great.
Well, eventually we'll get to them in our classic movie screening series that we do monthly, sometimes at your house.
You're going to cover all those films?
No,
Right,
I
yeah.
probably won't cover them all, but if I could live that long, that'd be amazing, though.
Welcome back in my house, JB.
Thanks. Next month, James. Alex, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'm excited to try to explore the 1954 list or 1959.
It's 9:59.
Okay, I'm excited to explore the films of 1959 this year to be able to watch along with you guys for the show next year and hear all
Oh
of
my
your.
gosh. You're gonna sort of join us without having to. James, how does that make you feel? Are you excited?
I've never had a groupie before. I'm so excited.
That might be a strong word for it.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.